How you doing? It's Tyler Hart again. Thank you for tuning in. You are now tuned into the pages in my diary. They're open to you, open to us, open for conversation, discussion, introspection, contemplation. A couple things I want to touch on today. A couple things I want to talk about. What I want to talk about, though, specifically today is discipline, self-discipline, versus the absence of self-discipline or even intemperance, a total lack of control almost, right? So what brings this to my mind is obviously self-discipline is, some say it's the mark of a higher person, or, I do believe, and I think that you would agree, without some sort of self-discipline, it's very difficult to make any sort of progress, especially the type of measurable progress that we're all seeking, as this type of progress is certainly done on purpose. It's intentional. They say change is inevitable, but progress is always deliberate. So this deliberate action requires some discipline. Surely we could all relax and stay inside our comfort zone, but I don't believe that when you have grass growing under your feet, there's any progress taking place there. So what I want to talk about today is discipline versus the lack thereof, people's perception of discipline, and maybe some of the reality about discipline and its purpose and its use, and what some perceive as potential drawbacks to discipline. And what I'm going to do to illustrate my point here a little bit better is I want to use an analogy that I've come up with, and it relates to little no's, big yeses, little yeses, and big no's. Not a big nose, but big no's, no plural. I know that sounds kind of funny, but just bear with me and I'll explain a little bit about what I'm talking about. So, having a conversation about discipline. Obviously, discipline is very important. I was having a conversation with somebody who's very close to me, who knows me well, and who knows my actions. Words are one thing, but who knows my actions, my consistent actions. And I think that, that's how we should judge others. I hate to say judge others because I know that has negative connotation, not to say we should pass judgment of others, but the way we come to understand who people are a lot is a combination of things. A lot of times what they say, what they do, most often what is given most credence is the things that you see people do, especially on a consistent basis. So I was having a conversation with someone who's very close to me. This lady, I won't say her name, but she knows me and a little bit about my personal philosophy that I've adopted, from who knows where, intentionally, unintentionally, over the years, which is an ever evolving process as I continue to strive to be a better individual, as I know that we all are, and that's what we all want. So I'm having a conversation with this person. We're having a conversation. She was remarking on some of my behaviors or actions or whatever the case was, but the conversation was this. So the conversation was around, some of my personal philosophy as far as the to-do list. We're all familiar with the to-do list, but also the not to-do list. And it's something that I stress even more importantly, something that I picked up along the way is the not to-do list. And I think that this not to-do list, in my personal opinion, is even more important than the to-do list. And I'll touch that on here in a minute. But what she told me was, she said, geez, well, there's so many things that you can't do. Like there are so many things that are on your not to-do list, right? That hardly seems, livable or enjoyable. Or how do you find personal happiness or fulfillment with such a long list of things that you are not to do, right? So this was what she shared with me. And it got me to thinking about, people's perception of discipline overall, and what is the accepted perception of discipline. I think that we all, I think discipline as a virtue, self-discipline as a virtue, I think we would all agree that it's virtuous, and I think that, at least when we're talking about it in conversation, is something that we certainly aspire to. However, as we know, talking about something and doing something are very different things. So we're having this conversation and she shares this thought with me. Well, life seems so boring, or it's so hard, or it's so restrictive. How do you ever find happiness or personal fulfillment? So I didn't, it was a short question, but the answer was quite long, so I didn't really expound on it too much. But I thought about it later as I'm thinking about it now, and this is what I want to share with you. So discipline versus the absence of discipline. So I'm thinking, right? And she tells me, well, your life seems so hard, it seems so boring. But I have to disagree, and I will strongly disagree, because I do believe that it's in the discipline that we're able to structure our lives in such a way that it amounts to our personal happiness, to the fulfilling of our true desires. So what I take this to mean is, rather than discipline yourself, you kind of just want to fly by the seat of your pants and do what feels good and do your best to indulge yourself of all your worldly desires. And what I mean by that is, these fleeting thoughts and emotions that come and go our way all day long, because we're just people. We have many of the same thoughts, feelings, wants, desires, many of these same things. But your life is so boring and so hard. So I have to argue to the contrary. Discipline is what sets you up to receive the greatest blessings, the greatest benefits, the most fulfillment in life. And the way for me to describe the situation is this. So what I call discipline is, discipline is like little no's. It's like saying no to the little things so that you can allow yourself to say yes to the bigger things, because you certainly cannot be in a position to receive the greatest things in life. Rather, you cannot receive the greatest things in life if you are not in a position to do so. Okay? Fortune favors the prepared individual. This is a fact. I think this is a, uncontestable law of whatever you want to call it, human nature, law of the universe, or however you want to go with that. So a bunch of little no's that allow you to say the big yes, to have the big yes, to reap the bigger benefits. What I mean by that is the little no's. She said, oh, well, you don't smoke, or you don't drink, or you don't eat sweets, or you don't sleep that much, or things like this, right? You're always doing something. I mean, it hardly seems like you relax. So what are you doing really, right? It seems like it's so restrictive. This self-discipline that you're always talking about is so restrictive. How could you possibly be happy? Well, look at it like this, and I think this is important for all of us to make this distinction. When you are living your life, with a total absence of self-discipline or self-control and restraint, and you don't withhold from seeking to fulfill all of your worldly desires. If you're hungry, you feel like snacking on ho-hos, you eat them. If you feel like, smoking, you smoke. Okay. If you feel like sleeping all day, hitting the snooze button, you do that. If you drink alcohol, or if you use drugs, for whatever reason you have these worldly desires, whatever, gratification that you get from engaging in these actions, which is only temporary, you engage in these things. However, not understanding that these actions long term will contribute ultimately to a lesser happiness. And it's crazy that we all know better, yet we continue to engage in these behaviors. So I try to explain to her, listen, I say a bunch of little no's that allow me to have the big yeses. You say a bunch of little yeses that ultimately they rob you from the opportunity to have all of your little yeses result in a big no. That's what it is. All of your little yeses result in a big no, right? So because you say that, oh, I'm hungry, I'm going to have a ho-ho, or I feel like smoking, I smoke, so you know what, I'm going to smoke, and I'm going to smoke, and I'm going to smoke. It's just a little yes. It's just a little yes. You know what, I'm tired, I don't feel like getting up right now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the snooze button. That's just a little yes. I've said yes to my little worldly desire. I had a little worldly itch, and I scratched it. It's nothing major. It's little yes, no big deal. Or here's a big one I think that everybody can relate to, is when it comes to spending money, or not, employing, the use of a budget, not being disciplined with your spending habits and stuff like that, right? So perfect way, we can all relate to this. So bunch of little yeses. Oh, you're out and about. Oh, I'll just spend a little here. Oh, I'll just spend a little there. Oh, I really like that. That's cute. I gotta have that. So yes, a little yes, little yes, little yes. Next thing you know, your money is gone. So when it comes time for the bigger things in life, the things that are more important, which you could be saying more important to who happiness is, or importance is subjective, right? Surely this is true, but we all have some major life needs that need to be fulfilled. We all need transportation, some form. We need a home. We need some place to live. We need food. So if you go along saying all of these little yeses, yes here, yes there, well, guess what? When it comes time for the bigger picture, you're not in a position to say yes to that, because you've depleted all of your financial resources. So now when it's time that you really need it, when the car payments due, or the house notes due, the rent's due, whatever the case may be, you are not in a position to say yes. to that, it's a no. It becomes a no because all of your little yeses resulted in a no, right? So what is it about that people have such a hard time saying no to themselves, right? Is I think it's also a matter of perception, and it's lack of willpower, a lack of self-discipline. You are not willing to get tough with yourself. You're not willing to say no to yourself. You need to learn to say no to yourself because you need to have the understanding that ultimately what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for the big yes. That's what's going on. No, I do not smoke cigarettes. I want to live. I want to be healthy. I like my life. I like to live my life. I like to feel what it feels like to be alive. Everybody knows these days the results of smoking. Everybody knows these days the results of obesity. So I do not engage in these type of behaviors. To me, these are little no's. Little no's, they set me up for the big yes. So here's an example. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't eat junk food anymore. Not to say I've never engaged in any of these behaviors, but I don't anymore. And that's, you live and you learn, hopefully. We all live sometimes. I think that's a matter of opinion too. But what I'm saying is this. I'm disciplined. Self-discipline is important. I don't go spending my money frivolously. I don't say all of the little yeses. I say the little no's. That allows my bank account to grow. So when that time comes where I need that larger sum of capital, for whatever the reason may be, if I need to invest in something, if I need to purchase a larger item that I really do need, I'm in a position to do that. Whereas I would not have been in that position had I been like the person who says little yes, little yes, little yes. And then guess what? Here's this big old life situation where you need a yes right now. You need a yes. But what happens? It's a no. And it's out of your control because you didn't exercise the self-discipline in the first place. You couldn't say the little no to yourself. Excuse me. And what I find particularly interesting about this is how is it that people are so quick to say no to themselves? So this is where I'm going to tie it in. I want to bring it back to the to-do list and the not to-do list, and why I feel that the not to-do list is so much more important, okay, than the to-do list, right? So here's what I mean by that. Look at it like this real quick. Not to-do list, right? The no, being able to say no to yourself. Look at it like this. When we're raising our children, I have 2 young children, and I know many of you have children, some of you don't, but I think obviously we were all children at one time, so you can understand where I'm coming from. So when we're raising our children, I'm surprised. I really am surprised. I don't, that my children's first words were not no. I can't remember what my wife would know better than I would, what the baby's first words were. But I'm just surprised that they weren't no, right? Because if you think about it, I don't know about you guys, but one of the most common words that my children hear from me is no, right? Why is that? Not because I'm mad at them or I want to punish them or anything like that, but obviously, no, don't run into traffic. No, don't stick your finger in that light socket. No, don't reach on top of that hot stove. No, right? It's very important that we have this self-discipline. In this case, we're disciplining the children, but we have to have the self-discipline so we can say no to ourselves. Surely we don't want our children to get burned, so we told them no, 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 right? These no's act as our guide. This no to your child acts as his guide, his or her guide, so that they're not running out in traffic or so they're not playing on the stove. These no's are very important. So how is it that you could be so quick to say no to your child because you believe it's in the best interest of your child for them to hear no, but you can't say no to yourself, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? That's pretty important right there. You could say no to your child all day long because you know and you believe, and you're probably right in most cases, that it's in the best interest of your child to hear the no. But you can't say no to yourself. So then at the end of the day, what you're really doing is engaging in behaviors that are not conducive to the achievement of your long-term goals, to the fulfillment of your long-term personal happiness. So long as you continue to indulge yourself and you continue to say all the little yeses, oh yes, I'll smoke a cigarette. It's just a cigarette. I'll stop tomorrow. Oh yes, I'll go spend this money on this dress or this pair of Jordans. I really like this. It's just a little yes. It's not a big deal. But when the bigger things come along in life, you will not be positioned to be able to receive those things. You won't be able to say yes to these things because you'll be out of yeses. You'll have ran out of yeses. And then guess what's coming? It's a no, right? And then at that point, what are you going to do? Some of these things are easier than others to undo, but most of the time you really have to understand the importance of, having self-discipline, and perspective is everything. Don't look at it like this, like, oh man, your life's so hard, you hardly have time to relax, it seems so boring, it seems so hard, you're punishing yourself. It's painful, the idea of self-discipline, and it is painful. A lot of times it is, but just like with anything else, with practice, and you condition yourself, and after a while, you really focus on the benefits of it, and you really do reap the rewards of it. And I think ultimately that is essential, in fulfilling our greater desires. It's very important. I hope that makes some sense to you guys. I know it makes a lot of sense to me. I surely don't have all the answers, and I'm just a work in progress myself. But like I said, we learn as we go along, and that's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing here. That's what I'm doing here. I'm learning. We are learning together, and we're learning from each other. I think that it's really important. I say you live and you learn. Hopefully. Right, because a lot of people, I'm sure I'm sure you've been guilty of it. I know I've been guilty of it at times. You live and you learn, but a lot of times you just live and you're really not learning. So it's very important that we learn from our mistakes. And I'm sure that if you watch back what I said and you kind of put this in the context of your own life currently, in the past, I think that you could see what I'm saying, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I think you got to look at self-discipline. It's very important to look at self-discipline as a small no. It's a small no that allows you the bigger yes. Self-discipline is just it's the not to-do list. That's what's going to guide you. And you know what? I think that if you have a to-do list and you have a not to-do list, but you cannot adhere to, what you've given yourself on the not to-do list, if you cannot refrain from engaging in these activities or whatever the case may be that's on your not to-do list, I find that it's much more difficult to get the things on your to-do list done in that situation. So I hope that makes sense to you. Have a little self-discipline. Understand that you're setting yourself up for the bigger win. The bigger win. Say a little no's. The little no's are trivial most of the time. They really don't matter. But that big yes is beautiful. When you get that big yes is going to be everything. Everything. So, hey, it is what it is. These are the pages of my diary. I'm Tyler Hart. The pages of my diary are open to you. I hope that you could leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. We can get the conversation going. It's in these powerful conversations with each other that we really truly grow. And I guess, that's really all that any of us could ever want and could ever ask for, is just a little bit of growth, Like I said, change is inevitable, but progress is deliberate. So with that in mind, let's continue to grow with each other. And I look forward to seeing you guys the next time around. So, have a good day. Be blessed.